All right. Hello, everybody. This is Tripp, and I'm here with my friend John Dominic Crossan, and we're gonna have a little nerdy fun today. Dom is in Florida, so he's not frozen in like we are here in North
Okay.
Carolina, and he's really past the age of having small children doing school from home. So I don't anticipate anyone sneaking up behind him. But I assume many of you are in similar situations. So um, if mine pop in, it happens. And if
That's
yours
right.
do, this is
Well,
being recorded. So you'll be able to watch it back later. Um, and on top of all that, we are wanting to make sure everyone here, live or later, knows about our upcoming Lent class, Jesus in Galilee, where Dom and I have already recorded his visual lectures that examine the historical Jesus in the setting of Galilee. And how his message and the form it takes of the parables and the proclamation of the kingdom of God found traction in that particular historical setting. And what do we end up learning and discovering about that connection of the medium and the message and the traction of Jesus' embodiment of the Jewish prophetic tradition there? And what would it look like to take it seriously in our own context? You can find all that info at crossanclass.com. Fun thing is, in just a few days, we'll put the 4 lectures up there. And then each week throughout Lent, we'll do live Q&As. And we do that because I know a lot of you, especially during the Lent and Advent classes, like to use what we're doing here to facilitate reading groups, discussion groups, small groups, Sunday school classes. So all the lectures will be available. And then you can send in questions from your group and such, and we'll have a good time. So, and again, it's donation based, including zero. So, you know, fill the lure. Fill the lure. I'm excited about this, Dom.
feel guilty. Feel guilty if you don't donate. In other words,
Well,
no, no.
I really like the fact that we end up with thousands of people, here getting to engage with your work. And for those that don't know, Dom is a pioneer in the study of the historical Jesus and the early Christian movement. Um, and just because he's in his 90s hasn't got him to slow down. He keeps going. So we all want to know the secret, but that's a whole different lecture. So I'm going to turn it over to Dom. He's prepared slides. We'll go through them. Everyone here that's joining live, if you have questions, put question in the chat, and then I'll save them for after the lecture part. And yeah, anyway, I'm going to turn things over here to Dom and be tracking the questions, and we will be back with you for some Q&A after. All right, Dom, you can take it away.
All right. So this is the first slide, and with your indulgence, I'm going to spend a few minutes on it because, in a way, everything is in this. I'm using. I call these slides. I don't know what else to call them. They're carefully crafted images. Obviously, they're not just slides, but we call them slides because they know the word for it. What I find about them is that they force me to be very, very clear in my own mind. I could talk for a while, and in there somewhere is what I want to say, but I have to get an image. So please look at this image for a minute before we get going. Okay, A Tale of Two Gods is a title, and that's a tale of two cities. It's probably overdone, but it's a tale of two gods. Now, look at those two images. They really sum up everything I'm going to say, everything I have said for the last 25 years. Look at Caesar. Caesar embodies, and none of this, I'm trying to be descriptive. Caesar, first of all, okay, back up. The two images that were taken by Sarah in situ, then cut out and cropped and improved and given the shave and the haircut if necessary. One is obviously from the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. That's Caesar. And Sarah improved him by putting in the victory, which, by the way, should not be facing us as it's sometimes shown, but should be facing him. So she's kind of compromised a little bit by slanting it that way. The other one, of course, is from the Grand Mosque, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. I try to make them a fair comparison without prejudicing it. Caesar is divine, and that's why he doesn't bother with clothes. Jesus is divine, and that's why he's got gorgeous clothes and an even more impressive throne. But look at the paraphernalia. Caesar, in his right hand, has the orb of the world. And on that orb is victory. He has conquered the world. That's the claim. You can laugh, you can jeer, you can say whatever you want, but that's a claim made by an image. In his left hand it's a scepter. You can see the top of it, but it's actually, what would I call it? The symbol of the spear. Because after I suppose, the cudgel and the club, the spear came next in the great arming of the world, let us say, before the bow and arrow were let alone the sword, of course. The spear, a pointy stick, can be your first weapon to kill somebody. Well, you can kill somebody, I suppose, with a club, but you have to work harder at it. So this is, whether we like it or not, the emblem of the power of violent force. It is the power of violent force, like it or not. The other image is, I'm going to call the power of nonviolent persuasion. What's Jesus got going for him? Well, he's got a book. Okay, he's not reading it, of course, because he is the embodiment of the book and the norm of the book. He doesn't have to read it. It's for us to read it and find him. But a book. I mean, I suppose he could batter somebody over the head with it, but no, it's persuasion. It is the power, by the way. It is the power of persuasion. And what's he doing with his left hand? He's raising it in a teaching gesture, 3 fingers, 2 fingers, the Byzantine emblem of the Trinity and the 2 natures of Christ, teaching and blessing. So you have, for me, these are the incarnations. These are 2 human beings, first of all, but they incarnate the tectonic forces of history and the clash of evolution. So in that gap between them, that little gap between them, that's where the sustainability of our species is being worked on. That's what's going on for me. If you say, well, I'm not interested in the Bible or religion or Christianity or Jesus or all of these guys, do you care about the sustainability of our species? If you say no, then I'm not really speaking to you. But anyway, there in those 2 images are what we're going to be talking about. 2 gods. Okay, now moving to the next slide and getting going. I want to start with a kind of an introduction with C.S. Lewis. And as you probably know, he was called Jack by his friends. I want to go back, if you look at the middle of each side there, I want to go back to a Sunday, the 24th of August in 1941 in London. We're listening to the BBC Home Service. There is no recording of it, so we have to trust this is what was said. Lewis is doing a series of about 24 15-minute lectures. Some of them were on Sunday between 4:45 and 5 p.m. First, I want to say my admiration for anyone who in London in August of 41, when, okay, the Blitz is a little bit over because Hitler is moving his air force from England to Russia to protect his armies, which aren't doing too well already before Stalingrad, Moscow, and Leningrad, but that's another story. So he's talking about Christianity. And yes, I respect him. And of course, I'm reading it now in the book that came out of those lectures called Mere Christianity, 1940. And I'm looking at a statement at the end of book 2, the lecture on what Christians believe, the end of the chapter, on the shocking alternative, page 52. That's where we can find it. Here's what he said. Either this man, talking of course about Jesus, was and is the Son of God, as he claimed, or else a madman or something worse. So this is the famous trilemma, Lord, lunatic, or liar. Jesus said He was the Son of God. He's either nuts or he's right. Put it simple, as a dilemma. And he said it again at the beginning of the next lecture. This will be the home service on Sunday, the 31st of August, as best I can find out. Everyone seems to have a different date for everything here. This man either was and is just what he said, or else a lunatic or something worse, a liar, in other words. He was and is God. So I want to start with that. Think of that trilemma for a moment. And I think I want to go also to the next slide as well. Yeah, because in the Narnia series, Lewis liked that trilogy, if you will, because he used it again for Lucy. This is quoting him now from the Chronicles of Narnia, Book 2, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I put up there side by side a picture that I found of the dust jacket of the 1950 edition. And you can see the slightly more, I don't know what term to use, but shall we say different one, the poster for the movie version of 2005. Logic, said the professor half to himself. Why don't they teach logic at these schools? There are only three possibilities. Either, he's talking to Peter, either your sister Lucy is telling lies, or she is mad, or she is telling the truth. The same trilemma. You know she doesn't tell lies. It is obvious she's not mad. Therefore, unless further evidence, we must assume she is telling the truth. So he likes that trilemma. Okay, moving to the next slide. And this is my criticism. And it's a serious criticism, and I'm not interested, honestly, in cheap cracks. I wouldn't be unkind enough to say that Lewis looks to me like he's blowing smoke. I would never say something like that. But here's what I want to ask him, and a serious question across time, and only because people are still using this. Otherwise, I'd leave him quietly back there in the 1940s. What, Jack, if there were two contemporary claimants to divinity? What if two people were, let me say for the moment, as if two people were saying Son of God and two people were saying God. And aside, a footnote here. This is where I really disagree with my colleague, New Testament colleague, Bart Ehrman. Bart said, well, we have no evidence that Jesus went around saying, I'm the Son of God. I am God. Of course he's right. He's perfectly right to say that. I would agree with him historically. But that's irrelevant because people said it. And for example, at the time he's speaking in 1941, Churchill didn't go around saying, I'm a genius, but lots of people said it. Or Einstein didn't go around saying, I'm a genius, but other people said it, and probably correctly. So you don't get around Lewis by saying, but he never said that. Other people said it about him, so we still have to explain it. Okay, so my challenge, Jack. If there were two contemporary claimants to divinity, what do you do? Well, you could say they're both nuts, of course. Or you could say, well, what's the difference between them? If there's two, yeah, maybe they're both nuts, or maybe they're both liars, but they can't be both lords. So you can't get around this by logic. You may have to make an act of faith to say, well, I'm for Caesar, I accept Caesar as Lord. I'm for Jesus, but you don't get around faith by logic. And that is a delusion that has haunted the halls of Cambridge and Oxford for a long time, that basically you can kind of prove this. So if you're not either Catholic or Christian, you're illogical. Moving then to the next slide. Okay, now, by the way, when I went looking at the web for images here, you see Peter there, and half the time on the web, he's left-handed. And half the time on the web, he's right-handed, which could be possible. He could be ambi-handed, I suppose, except that rampant lion on his tunic tends to veer to the left and the right correspondingly. So we just had bad images, in other words. Now, here's what's really at stake to get it up front. Here's what I would really want to discuss with Lewis if I had him in my room. What is at stake between two Mediterranean gods? What is at stake between Caesar and Christ then and now? As I understand it, what is at stake is whether cosmic peace will come from violent victory, which has a long, successful history in establishing lull, L-U-L-L, and calling it peace, or from distributive justice. That's what's at issue. What programs, what projects, what visions, what traditions do those two gods, if you will, embody? And which side are you on? And here's where I really, really want to criticize C.S. Lewis. After Peter kills the wolf, Peter turned, and Aslan, the lion, who is Christ, of course, "You have forgotten to clean your sword," said Aslan. "Whatever happens, never forget to wipe your sword." I don't know, could Lewis have been saying that and not remembering or thinking what Jesus said in the garden, "Return your sword into its place. Those who take the sword will perish by the sword." And John even specifies it more particularly. Jesus said to Peter, "Put the sword into the sheath." Different reason, shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? So it's which Peter and what to do with your sword. All right, then. Moving to the next slide. What I want to start and do next is try and understand, really understand, how did it happen that before Jesus ever appeared on the scene, and if Jesus had never appeared on the scene, there already was a human being in the first Mediterranean world, first century Mediterranean world, who was considered divine. Where's everyone nuts? What did people mean when they called Caesar divine? How did the human being, Octavian, and he was human, if you stuck a sword in him, he was going to die, become and remain the divine Augustus Sebastus? Augustus is Latin, Sebastus is Greek. And we kind of forget we're talking about Caesar the Augustus Sebastus, Latin and Greek, and we're talking about Jesus the Messiah Christ. Those anglicized terms. Claims are being made about two human beings. You are free to deride the claims, to mock them, to jeer them, to laugh at them, to ignore them. You are not free to say they didn't happen. So I want to know, how is it possible that Caesar was considered by people to divine? Even if he said, "I am divine," and went around saying everyone, how did people accept it? And then we'll have to look then, okay, if that was Caesar, then something is happening in this first century where the emphasis is no longer on the temple as the locus of sanctity and divinity, the house of God, as it were, but a person can become, as it were, God in a toga for Caesar, or God in sandals for Jesus. How did that happen, especially at this time? Next slide, then. All right, fast look at the Roman world. We're talking about 20 years of savage on again, off again civil war, in round numbers from 50 to 30. 20 years. So to try and imagine it, imagine our civil war had gone on not for 4 years, but 20 off again, on again. And suddenly somebody called Lincoln had appeared, had brought peace between the two sides, and had lived for 40 years to reconcile the two sides, so that instead of a bloody civil war followed by a equally bloody in its own way Cold War that's still going on in our country, everything had been pacified and peaceful. Try and imagine it, 20 years. And we're going to be looking at 3 rounds very swiftly. Caesar against Pompey, round 1. Octavian and Antony versus Brutus and Cassius, Octavian and Agrippa versus Antony and Cleopatra. And again, I'm not trying to batter you with facts and battles as if that's all that's going on, but I want you to take a very close look at the Battle of Actium. Next slide. Because in one sense of the world we're still living in, I think this is still operational. I try to close my eyes and imagine what would have happened if he wasn't even Augustus yet, if Octavian had lost the Battle of Actium, which in one sense he should have in all sorts of ways before that. Well, first of all, in the center of Rome would have been Alexandria. There never would have been a Constantinople. Cleopatra would certainly have protected Judaism. I don't know if Christianity would ever have got going. Everything would have changed. So now, let me look for a moment at Horace. This is a medallion from the 300s to the 400s. The Roman Civil War, on again, off again, as I said, from 49 to 31. Here's Horace in the year 41 BCE, of course. Rome, through her own strength, is tottering. The city that nobody has the power to ruin, we ourselves shall ruin. We, an impious generation of accursed blood. I'm sorry, I can't read that today without thinking of us. America, through her own strength, is tottering. Nobody could destroy us, but we're doing a real good job ourselves. And, says Horace in another context, why are you sneering at me? Change but the name, and the tales told of you. That's what I just did. All right. So let's say 41. Now, moving on to the next slide. All right. Very fast. 3 rounds, as I said before. So the first round, Gaius Julius Caesar, those are his dates, is defeated Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus and the Senate. He's really a rebel. At the Battle of Pharsalus on the plain of Thessaly in east central Greece. Now, if anyone's paying attention, look what's happening. There is a civil war going on in Italy, and they're fighting it out in Greece. Oh, that's a great idea. If you're having a civil war, you should fight it out in another country. That'll ruin their country, and then you can pick up the pieces in yours. And notice, by the way, that the one who fled to Greece, Pompey, lost this round of the war. If anyone's watching, you might say, stay in Italy, don't flee to Greece. But okay, round 2. Next slide. These 3 little books I have there are kind of the best, whether you like the images or not, the best summary of the 3 great battles. The second battle, you have Caesar's supporters, Octavian and Mark Antony. Caesar, we're talking about Julius Caesar, of course, has been assassinated, as you know, and they defeated Caesar's assassins. So Caesar's supporters defeated Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, at the 2 battles of Philippi. Hey, again, they're in Greece. The loser goes to Greece. On the battles of Philippi in North, and again, I give you the date, 42. I'm moving then to the 3rd and final round. So, as we look at this, it's almost, you say, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's hard not to see it as inevitable. And of course, what you get from somebody like Virgil, who is the poet laureate of the Augustan age, he makes it inevitable because it was all the creed at the beginning of Virgil's Aeneid up in heaven. Jupiter agreed the whole program of the destiny of Augustus and says at the end of it, sic placitum. In other words, that's it. Anyway, let me get back. Axiom. That's what we're going to focus on. Octavian and his Admiral Agrippa. Really, we have to insist on that because Agrippa was an admiral. That is, he knew that an admiral was not just a general who happened to be on a ship. He thought like an admiral. Defeated Antony and his great ally, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. And anything that you thought beforehand, you'd have thought, Antony, Antony and Cleopatra. They're going to win, of course. At the Battle of Actium in the Ionian Sea off northwest, here we go again, northwestern Greece. You want to say, oh, Antony, weren't you watching history? Anyway, moving to the next one. Now we're focusing now on Actium. Look at the logistics. And you always have to look at logistics. That's your destiny. That's your doom, as Napoleon and Hitler found in Russia. Watch your logistics. If you're coming from Alexandria to Actium in Greece, where the battle is going to take place, look at the distance. Alexandria to Actium, 2,000 miles against the wind. Against the wind. Lots of scholars talk about all of this and never mention the wind. Brundisium, if you're coming from Italy into Greece, Brundisium, 200 miles. Yeah, it's open sea and the storm can get you just as well there as anywhere else. But in the spring and summer of 31, look at those logistics. And if you're coming, as I said, from the west to the east, you have the wind with you. So once you clear Sicily, preferably in one piece, you have a straight run to Alexandria. Going in the opposite direction, as both Josephus and Paul found out, you're going against the wind and you're liable to be splattered all over Africa or Malta. In any case, hold on to that visibility as we move to the next slide. This is a close-up of what we just saw. The Ionian Sea is out to the left of this slide. There's a big bay up there on the left, Gomarus Bay, and the modern town on the northern promontory is Preveza. That's where you're going to fly into. There's two promontories. You can see there they almost pass one another. If you imagine, say, the San Francisco Bay with the north and south promontories going past one another. So it's hard to get in and out. And there's a temple of Apollo on Cape Actium, which seems to be a destiny for Augustus. There's a huge gulf called the Ambracian Gulf. It's still there. It's a giant wetlands today. And we're looking at September the 2nd, 31 BCE. By the way, if you look at the southern promontory, do you see that strip across it? Kind of a slightly white strip on the lower promontory below the Temple of Apollo. That's the modern airport. We flew into there in 2004. And then there's a tunnel under the water connecting the southern promontory and the northern promontory. But that's where, and by the way, if you're trying to come out to the sea and clear, there's a big island down there. It's a big resort island now, but you have to clear to the west before you can go anything. So you have a whole situation, and huge amount is dictated, not everything, of course, by the wind. Moving to the next slide. Okay, here's the setup on September of 31 BCE, in the dawn, in the morning. The fleet and the camp of Octavian and Agrippa. You can see it there. The little dot is the battle tent of Octavian. And it's a dangerous position. He's in the opening sea. If there had been a storm that morning, they would put his fleet on top of his camp, and that would be the end of it. On the other hand, you can look over at the camp of Antony and Cleopatra and their battle tents. When we landed in 2004, we landed right on top of his battle tent, as it were, or his camp. And you can see their squadron, 3 huge squadrons of Cleopatra's single squadron and Antony's 3 squadrons. Now, during the spring and summer of 31, Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was halved. And remember, an army, it's relatively, I'm not going to say easy, but you can replace troops faster than you can replace rowers. They have to be trained to do it together. So if your fleet is halved by disruptive, here we go with logistics, by disruptive supplies from Alexandria, Agrippa spent the summer picking off all the supply depots between Alexandria and Antioch. That's what he was doing. Malaria disease roars. Look at those wetlands. It's a magnificently safe Ambracian Gulf. It still is there, one of the biggest wetlands in Europe. But where there's wetlands, there's malaria. And his roars are going to be ravaged all summer. They're perfectly safe. They're tucked in there safe, but malaria is all around them. And finally, allies are starting to desert. After all, Octavian is divine. He's the son of the divine Julius Caesar. So if you were betting on the morning of that September morning, you would have bet on Mark Antony, backed by the power, the wealth of Egypt. Of course, you would say, definitely, Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, moving to the next slide. What happened by the afternoon, the wind shifts and the fleets come out. So the Mark Antony's comes out from the Ambracian Gulf. And then as best we can figure out, try to cut your way through the propaganda and the anti-female hysteria about Cleopatra, it looks like they came out to fight if they had to for flight. I think that's the best way to put it. They didn't come out to flee because they knew they might have to fight their way out to flee, but they came out for flight because their treasure chest was aboard and their sails were on board. You don't do that if you're coming out for a battle. So Cleopatra's flagship cut through the lines as Octavian's lines opened up. Mark Antony deserted his fleet in plain language, got onto her flagship and took off. For Egypt, for Alexandria, for suicide, and for legend. It was all over. In one sense, it was the most important battle you can imagine, but it was kind of a dud. It kind of was over before it began. All right, moving to the next one. But now, of course, you can say the propaganda begins. I love this image. It's from the faithandreason.org, from a series they did on the historical Jesus with me years ago. I'm imagining Propertius Elegies 4. He has both Julius Caesar and Apollo appear. Apollo says, and he addresses Octavian, savior of the world. Augustus, of course, he's writing afterwards. Augustus, he's already Augustus, but he's savior of the world. Now conquer at sea, the land is already yours. And Julius Caesar says from the star of Venus, his symbol, I am a god. This victory proves you are of my blood. Moving to the next one. And I'm going to take you back. If you imagine that scene that night with burning hulks all over the horizon off the coast of Axiom, Octavian had both victory and a problem, propaganda problem. How do you proclaim victory when the defeated enemies were Romans in a Roman civil war, which is the truth? He conquered in a civil war, and their leader was the great and beloved Mark Antony. The solution: proclaim himself, Octavian, as victor over Cleopatra and as bringer of peace for the whole world. It's almost like rhythmic in Latin. Pace parta terra marique, pace parta terra marique. Peace established on land and sea. That's his proclamation. Get over the war stuff and proclaim peace real fast. And if you can hold on to it, it sounds good. So going back to Virgil's Aeneid, they set it up as here, Hink, here Augustus Caesar leading Italians. I mean, yeah, we won't mention he's killing Italians. Augustus Caesar leading Italians, all the mighty gods, and on his head his father's star. Hink, Anthony, Egypt and the strength of the East. So it's West against East. And oh, the shame of it, his Egyptian wife. Yeah, we'll mention her for shame. monstrous gods of every form and barking Anubis, yield weapons against Neptune, Venus. So the gods of Egypt are defeated by the gods of Rome. This is cosmic. Moving to the next slide then. I want to look at now what Caesar left behind at Axiom. Look at this coinage. First of all, I think it is the most serenely beautiful coinage from the ancient world because it's simple. It's first-rate propaganda advertisement. Don't get too messy. So six coin types now. Look at the ones to the left of your screen for a moment. You have the head of Octavian. This coinage was already available right after Axiom, so it must almost have been minted beforehand. The hope that he would win, of course, but it's minted beforehand, and Octavian brilliantly pays off both armies. His own conquering army and Mark Antony's defeated army. You really don't want a defeated army wandering around Greece. So he paid off them both. So this is the first sign that you're going to say that, yeah, he's going to be a god for the long haul. Okay, look over to the left then. On the front of the coin, this first set, you've simply the head of Octavian. You don't bother with a crown or anything else like that. And you don't fuss around with a whole inscription around him because that'll just make his face smaller. His face, he is becoming something brand new, the embodiment of a program. He's incarnate program. So you have his head on the front of this set. Now on the back, you have three different goddesses. Three different goddesses. First, the goddess Pax, peace, and she's holding in her right hand, the symbol of peace, the olive branch, and in her left hand, the cornucopia. Peace means prosperity and plenty. That's what you could translate as it's the economy, stupid. Peace means prosperity. Looking down at the next one, you have Venus, who is his ancestress deity, and she's kind of toying with the weapons of Mars, her consort. So she's, you could say, really make sex, not war, as it were, because that's what it's showing. She's playing around with his armor. And down at the bottom, you see the symbol, the star symbol of Julius Caesar. And then finally, down at the bottom, and of course, you have Victoria. And she's standing on the orb, this orbed maiden, as it were. She's standing on the orb, and she's offering, of course, the crown of victory to Octavian. Now, that's a magnificent set. When you look at the other set, well, the same three goddesses have their heads on the front. So one set had head of Octavian, body of the goddess. Then you have head of the goddess. So it's like, it's so hard to remember. We're all gods here. So it really doesn't matter whose head's on the front or whose emblem is on the back. We're all gods. So no big deal. So you get, for example, the head of Pax, you get the cornucopia again, and the olive branch. Now, the first coin over there, presume a sequence. He is addressing the troops. He's standing with his right hand raised in the alocutia gesture. And of course, he's got the spear over his shoulder. The spear, as we saw, is the symbol of the right to wield weaponry. Down below, he's giving the attack, as it were. Charge, the attack symbol. And down at the bottom, you have the goddess Victoria. Again, she's winged. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned, Venus is on the middle one because she has a necklace, which is one way of mentioning she's beautiful. Of course, they all look rather beautiful. But in any case, the bottom one, of course, winged victory. She's winged because the gods send her somewhere, and now they send victory, always, of course, to Rome. But look at the emblem. First of all, of course, Octavian is nude. He's carrying the spear again, and his foot is on the world. He's conqueror of the world, as it were. Over in the other one, she's kind of the winged victory is on the world. He's got his right foot on the world. That's usually where control. And what he's holding in his right hand is the adornment you usually find on the stern of a boat. And the only words that are on them, but they're on every one: Caesar DVF, Caesar, son of the divine one. That's all. It is magnificent propaganda, because Maecenas, who is his propaganda chief, as Agrippa is his war chief, didn't have to learn anything from American advertisement. This is how you advertise. Moving to the next one, another major advertisement. Now, this was a picture we took in 2004, and I like it because it's clear, but we'll see it really isn't accurate at all. It's an imagination of what Caesar did, what Octavian, of course, I mean. Octavian, the first thing he did was found a city on the site. Now, the reason you do that is you go, what are all these troops going to do? Okay, you gave them money, but that's dangerous. So the first thing you do is you found a city. Now, of course, you're taking other people's territory, of course, but they're not going to worry about that. To the conqueror belongs the spoil. So you found a city, and it's called Nicopolis, Victory City. But more than that, that takes care of the veterans, of course, and all the rest of it. More than that, Octavian's battle tent, his bedroom in plain language, his battle tent, which we saw on the northern promontory, is made into a sacred shrine. So it's not just peace, it's Augustan peace, as we know from the altar of Augustan peace. He incarnates the program. And that's going to be important, of course, for Jesus too. So you have an altar there, just leave that there for the moment. And you have the arcade around it. This is on top of his battle tent. And by the way, it's not really a good place to put up a memorial, because the battle tent, as we'll see, is taken in terms of a good view. And sometimes a good view is not where you want to build something. There are two rows of, you see the rams down there? Those are the attack rams that are always on the front of a warship in the ancient world. So it can slam into your side, as it were, and open up the side of your warship, or go right along your rowers and shear off all your rowers. And what there is a list, I think there's about 34 actually, of the conquered rams from Mark Antony and Cleopatra's fleet, from the largest to the smallest, from left to right. And there's only one row, by the way, so 2 rows is artistic license. And above that is the summary program that Octavian wanted to write as a word, to carve into stone. Here's what this all means. So moving to the next one. This is a shot from 2004. The grass is growing over everything. What was happening in 2004 is the Olympics were in Athens in late August. Sarah and I got here in September, I think it was the 18th, something like that. And they've been trying desperately, the Greek government, to get this place set up so you could visit it with the people who came, because of the Olympics and wanted to tour Greece. And this is a really off the main roads, the main sites. So they were trying to get it ready. And we were there in September, and it wasn't ready. It really wasn't ready at all. So at least you could look at this remnant of where the line of the rams were, and you could imagine a huge bronze ram fitting right into the stone. They had to carve the stone to the size of each ram, which was diminishing from the largest ships to the smallest ships. And it was ready within about 2 years. By the time uh, Octavian came back after overseeing, shall we say, the suicide of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Huge amount just for a shrine on his battle tent. All right, moving to the next slide. All right, here's the way it actually looked to us. Those are what's left of the inscription. And when we were there, as you can see, we were kind of trampling down the grass so we could get a shot even of the individual ones. But here on Sunday, September the 12th, 2004, at least was, it's not all present, by the way, but here's what he said. Imperator Caesar, son of the divine Julius, there it is, following the victory in the war which he waged on behalf of the Republic in this region, when he was consul for the 5th time, imperator for the 7th time. Now, here's the key thing. Pace parta terra marique, after peace had been secured on land and sea, consecrated to Mars, sea god, war god, and Neptune, the sea god, the camp from which he set forth to attack the enemy, now ornamented with naval spoils. I don't know if anyone ever came up with the idea before of turning your battle tent, it's a fancy name if you want to say your bedroom, it's we're down to it, into a sacred ground. You can't simply think of this except as an incarnate program. You can't think of it just as a program that succeeded. It's incarnate in Caesar. And again, if he had died from wounds by nightfall, even if he had conquered, everything would be up for discussion. It presumes you're going to have about 40 years of successful rule. Moving then to the next slide. Okay, now here's what actually happened. I'm sorry, this is a bit self-indulgent. We got there. We flew from Orlando to Dulles, Washington, to Athens, and arrived up there the night before. And on the morning, Sunday morning, we're standing in front, not here, front of the big front gate down on the road, and it is absolutely securely locked. And we're just about ready to start crying. Obviously, we come all the way here just for this, and you could see inside there was a front loader, all the equipment. They were trying desperately to get this ready. There were pipes to get the drainage, and they hadn't succeeded, so it was closed down. And of course, if it had been a work day, nothing could have been possible. They'd have said it's a hard hat area, go away. So we're standing in front of the gate. That's our driver with us. And somebody stops in a truck, big dog in the back of the truck. And he says, we wanted to scream in Greek, talking to him. You guys trying to get in there? See, I'm thinking, no, we just like looking at it. We said, yeah. So the driver, he talked in Greek for a while. And he said, look, if you want to get in, just follow me. So he took us all the way around the road from the front all the way to the back. He said, we go in here all the time. So from inside, the fence was pulled away. And this is me exiting my archaeological discovery. But you can see behind me where the actual stones were. They were just under a kind of a crazy roof with the grass growing all over them. You couldn't even take a photograph without kind of, I was trampling it down for Sarah to take photographs. Okay, moving to the next slide. This is the way it really is today with Kostas Zakos, a first-class archaeologist who's taken over it. So he has a new model there to take a picture of. The altar is in the right direction now. And he has only one layer, one layer of rams. But I prefer to use the other one because you could see the rams more clearly. You wouldn't know what they were there, but you could see the white line of the inscription. So Octavian founds the city of Nicopolis, as I said, but his battle tent becomes sacred ground for Romans to visit on tour, actually. And this I appreciate from the Archaeological Museum of Nicopolis, where they are trying a huge jigsaw puzzle of putting that altar back together and trying to see what was on it and everything else. It's as if you had, well, you did have it, I suppose, the altar of Augustine piece in pieces, and Mussolini had to try and put it back together, but it was in bigger chunks at least. They're trying to see what was on that image and restore it eventually. So moving to the next slide, and I think our final image, here's the way it really looks now. We've never seen this one because this is how it is today. You can see down at the very bottom, you can see the all the pieces of the pieces that are left, because during the war, I suspect, when the Second World War, when all of this was occupied, I would imagine a lot of these were used for lime. You know, if you burn this marble, it makes very good lime. They're destroyed, and I can't think of any other way except for use, because you couldn't transport them except big trucks and all the rest of it. Anyway, that's the way it looks today. You can see down at the front, you can see the actual words that I quoted you above. Then build up. If you look at that, you can see the problem. It's sloping down, so you have a huge drainage problem. It's sloping from left to right, so you have another drainage problem. It's a nightmare site. I think they may have it stabilized at the moment, and this is the best you can do to see it. So Octavian's axiom inscription is now set up in front of rather than above the ram's wall. But in any case, it's a huge ongoing restoration project. Okay, moving to the next slide. Now, here's what I want to insist. The Greco-Roman world knew the idea of they would call it a hero, or say a great general. And so did the Jewish world for somebody like Moses. They understood that when you died and were safely gone, you might be considered a god. That had happened. You could be a human being who had been exalted to the gods, because the job description of a human being becoming a god in the Greco-Roman world, whether we like it or not, by the way, was that you had done something. This is the job description. This is your curriculum vitae. This is your resume. You have done something of extraordinary value for the human race, like the labors of Hercules protecting people, or the invention of healing for Aesculapius, or if you like the invention of wine, maybe that might be there too. But something of extraordinary value to the human race, and thereby manifested some aspect of divinity. That's your job description. At least somebody is saying this guy is divine, and it's usually a man, by the way, very few women. But this person has done this, and therefore. Now, it could be a philosopher, it could be a general, it could be a saint for the Jewish tradition. I mentioned Moses, for example. If it was part of the wallpaper of the Greco-Roman world, human beings could be exalted to divinity after they were safely dead. It still holds on in the Roman Catholic Church. Saints are declared to be saints when they are safely dead. If you declared a saint who's alive, and what if the saint said, the Pope's not doing too well? So saints are safely dead. Martyrs are great, by the way. Martyrs are by definition dead. So they make great saints. So in the Roman world, look at Horace. A person scorches with his brilliance, who outweighs merits lower than his own. So people get jealous. So you don't want to say when they're alive, oh, this person is divine. The same reason that we said be very careful saying somebody is a genius. I'll be very careful giving somebody the Nobel Peace Prize, shall we say, for us. Yet he too will win affection when his light is quenched. So people get it when they're safely dead. But upon you, Augustus, while still among us, we bestow honors betimes, set up altars to swear by in your name, and confess that nothing like you has ever arisen before or will ever arise again. Oh, this is This is new stuff. This is not the way we had human beings becoming divine when they were safely dead. So going to the next image. All right. Now, most of the slides are going to be talking about Christ. So I just want to raise the issue. The common titles of Caesar the Augustus and Jesus the Christ. Now, again, remember those are titles. Augustus is not Mr. and Mrs. Augustus's little boy Augustus, or Christ is not Mr. and Mrs. Christ's little boy Christ. Jesus, the Messiah Christ, that's the title. Caesar, the Augustus Sebastus. For example, Redeemer from sin, Savior of the world, God from God, by the way, from Julius Caesar. New Creator, Son of God, Lord, God, just by abbreviation. These were the titles of Caesar before there were ever the titles of Jesus. Now, Jesus was never called Imperator, Caesar was never called Messiah, and I'm not claiming that Jesus might not have had those titles if Caesar didn't. But they are ways of making a claim, a counterclaim. I am not saying, and never said, and anyone who says this I would disagree with. Well, these are just titles, they threw them around in those days. They were just like court protocol, court respect. Nobody meant them. Try telling Caesar you're just a metaphor and see what happens. And when Octavian got to Alexandria and found there was a Caesarion there, a son by birth of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Of course what he did. He assassinated him. And when the assassins approached poor little, he was late teenager, Caesarion, did Caesarion say, wait, I'm just a metaphor, I'm just a metaphor. Don't take this literally, please. When they strangled him, did they just think, well, he's just a metaphor, we should let him go? Anyway, titles are claims. Next slide. Now, here's the question. Here's the first century question. Here's almost the only question worth asking for the first century. How is it possible that those titles for the Roman emperor, Caesar the Sebastus Augustus, who lived on the Palatine Hill in Rome, continuing into the next slide, are the same as the titles for the Jewish peasant, Jesus the Messiah Christ, who lived on the Nazareth Ridge in Galilee? Is this some kind of a cosmic joke? And was the whole problem was that the Romans had just no sense of humor. They didn't see that this was just a Jewish joke. We're just having fun. It's like Friday Night Live on the Tiber. Or did the Romans get it right and clear? This is an opposition. Okay, next slide. So we have seen the Roman motto was peace through violent victory. And Caesar, by the way, if you said anything to him, would have been puzzled. He said, that's the way of the world. That's how things work. We have seen what he said at Axiom Pace Parta Terra Marique. And then when he came to write his own res gesti, as we call it, Divi Augusti, call it his last will and testament de facto, he comes up with another phrase, Parta Victorious Pax, peace established by victories. It's the first century mantra of Roman imperial theology. With religion, say, thank you, Mars, thank you, Neptune, sorry. Religion. With religion on your side, you go to war. With religion on your side in war, you get victory. And from victory comes peace. I'm not going to mock it and say, oh, it's just about brutality, cruelty, war, victory. Nope. This is also my claim, the evolutionary threat from the normalcy of civilization, because that is the mantra of civilization. If we just get the right final victory, if we could just get it, and it would have to be cosmic, or it'd have to be universal, or it'd have to be outer space, or whatever, then we have peace. And the alternative tectonic in the next slide. The alternative to all of this, the tectonic plates of history grinding against one another, peace through distributive justice. I cheated a little bit there. That's actually a picture of Doubting Thomas, but it worked. The first century mantra of Jewish messianic Christic theology is religion, nonviolence, justice, and peace. You will not get peace from victory. You will, of course, get lull, and that might last your lifetime, and everything looks good. If you just get it for a lifetime, as any politician will know, you'll get away with it. But if you look across history, what we have always got was lull, pending the next round, which is always more violent than the preceding one. So the question I ask again is the sustainability of a species built on escalatory violence, especially when escalatory violence is accelerating regularly. By that, I mean it took 3,000 years to get it from iron sword to atomic bomb, as has been noted by other scholars. But it only took less than 100 years to get from the Wright Flyer, WRIGHT, the Wright Flyer, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, to a stealth bomber. Wow, we are good. Maybe we're good at getting everything better, but that's what makes us dangerous. I think that is also the evolutionary challenge from the vision of post-civilization. Can we get past this? Can we get past the idea that if we just got the right victory with the right weapons, then we'd have peace? Moving to the next slide and closing down, I just want to look at a couple of things to leave with us to think about. Theology is the interpretation of history as I see it. If you're making up theology, of course, all by itself, you can do that. There's nothing to stop you having Star Wars or anything you want. You're just, it's magnificent. It's just fiction. And people love fiction because the world is divided, or literature is divided into fiction and nonfiction. So clearly fiction is the beloved one. The rest of the stuff is simply all non. So there's nothing wrong with imagining a great cosmic strife, anything you want, Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or whatever. But it is fiction. Now, two things I want to look at in the next slide, and I'm going to leave you with this. The next slide, one of the magnificent achievements of Roman imperial theology, its claims for divinity tended to be left oblique and indirect. For example, in the Hermitage Museum, when you go down below, the first thing you see is that image of Caesar, full image of Caesar. And Sarah took that image. Then when she went to the next bay, right next to it, is this statue of Zeus Olympius, Zeus from Olympia, from the Olympic site where the games are held. And it's one of the seven wonders of the ancient world because it's huge. And look at it. It's isomorphic to Caesar Augustus. Now, in the ancient world, if anyone looked at Caesar Augustus, they would ask themselves, am I looking at Jupiter or am I looking at Zeus? And if it's Jupiter, is this like the incarnation of Jupiter, or is it like Jupiter runs heaven and this guy runs the earth? You're thinking theology. You are making it up, of course, but you're trying to interpret. Rome never called a conference at Nicaea to work out how could Caesar be divine and human at the same time. Wow, we need some good Greek philosophy to work this out. They would have said, if Greek philosophy can't figure it out, we could send them the legions to teach them. They left it oblique, but don't think it wasn't serious. They let you figure it out for yourself. In a way, it was a little bit parabolic. So let me look at the next slide. And I'm just going to use these two. The, the, the last slide was statues. Here is poor old Ovid. Ovid was a great poet, but he tended, we don't quite know what he did, but some kind of a what I would call politico erotic indiscretion. Ovid was the kind of poet who would say something like, these Augustan triumphs are really marvelous. They're a great place to pick up chicks, using that language to mirror his own language. Now, Augustus wouldn't find that funny. Augustus did not have a sense of humor about his divinity, if you will. And no, he didn't go around saying, I'm God, I'm God. But don't make any jokes about maybe Augustan triumphs or anything else. Anyway, he exiled Ovid to the back of beyond on the what was it, the midwestern coast of the Black Sea. And poor old Ovid is trying desperately to get back to Rome. Oh, if he could only get back to Rome. But he's fallen out, of course. Now, he writes the Tristia, sorrow, in Latin, the sorrows of an exile. And he has a poem. And I think this is fabulous. He imagines himself with a tour guide wandering the Palatine Hill. In other words, I'm back home. And he says, seeing this magnificent mansion, is this the home of Jove? I asked, I thought so. Look at the pun, auguring from the crown of oaks. Learning its owner was Augustus. In other words, the guy said, oh, no, that's the home of Augustus. I was right, I answered. It's true, this is the home of mighty Jove. Of course, it's flattery. Of course, he's trying to get back to Rome. But that's Roman indirect theology. You look at the great house and you say it's Jove's house, and you mean Augustus. Okay, let me look at two more things. The next slide, two more things I want to leave you to think about. You can see the image of Christ again from Hagia Sophia, and you can read what's in his hands. Eirene humin, peace to you in Greek. Ego eimi ta phos tou cosmo. I am the light of the world. I want you to hear John, and I want you to hear Matthew. You are the light of the world. Let those vibrate against you. Would the top one be enough by itself? Would the bottom one be enough by themselves? Or somehow our destiny to play those against one another? And of course, light is a metaphor. So if you were to say, I am the peace of the world, or I am the justice of the world, you are the peace of the world. And then moving to the next one, I want us to think about this. The most, how would I put, term do I use? The statement of Jesus to love your enemies. What on earth does that mean? Now, are we talking about some kind of emotional attachment to your enemy? Sort of a Stockholm syndrome for the universe? This is the way Jesus says what we call non-violent resistance. There's no statement that Jesus said, I'm for non-violent resistance. It's said different ways, of course. But this is what love your enemies means. You resist them non-violently. If you don't resist them, you're in effect telling them they're okay. How you do it without getting killed is another question. But you do it internally before you do it externally. And maybe you can only do it internally. But non-violent existence is how you love your enemies. And let me see, I don't know if there's another slide. Okay, yeah, I'm going to leave you with this, because this is where I am at the moment. And this is exactly the slide that I used to conclude in the Theology Beer Camp in 24, did I get that? Yeah, 2024, at the end of the discussion on the groaning of creation. These are challenges. Whether we are theistic or atheistic, wherever you are, agnostic or indifferent or anything, as an experiment for the next few thousand years, on the presumption we have them, bracket that debate, could we? or even any emphasize on any of those options. Just bracket them. Don't don't deny them because that'll focus all your energy. Bracket them and accept that the universe works by evolution. If you have the most classical God you can imagine, that God works by evolution. Don't fake it. Don't fake it. As understood by ongoing scientific investigation. Yeah, we know maybe we don't like the classical God working by evolution. Get over it. Focus on humanity's triadic and escalatory violence against the environment, against other species, and against ourselves. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing. Ask whether Homo sapiens is a sustainable species. That's the only question. Are the most endangered one because the most endangering one? Is our species sustainable? And I am quite aware that politics doesn't want to ask questions longer than the next election. But then, if religion has any validity at all, any religion, that's the question it should be asking. Are we a sustainable species? And maybe at the back of it, consider whether religions are no more and no less than intuitions of evolution seen through a glass darkly. What people grasped before they knew anything about evolution, but grasping it, evolution seen through a glass darkly. And that is my overture then to the Lenten series.
All right. Well, thank you, Dom. Thank you very much. Um, Again, everyone on here, feel free to go over to crossanclass.com where you can join, meet up with us over Lent, and you'll get access to all the lectures, can send questions and that kind of thing. All right. I tried to organize all the different comments and questions down to just a few topics.
You're marvelous at doing this. I don't know how, honestly, I'm not just flattering you, but to organize all of that would drive me crazy. Anyway.
Well, it's easier when they email them and I have time to look at it. But here we go, Dom. All right. So the first one, C.S. Lewis question, when you're doing a little framing, seems to be obsessed with the person of Jesus, right? Like how does one understand the humanity and the divinity? And it seems that both in the way the claims for Caesar play out, as you express them, and the counterclaims or alternative claims that you see in the person of Jesus, it's really a contest of what is the work of God or what does the salvation of God look like. And I wonder if you're thinking to that question of Jesus' identity and the way the early church are wrestling with it or the disciples are wrestling with it, if that question of the work of Jesus or the salvation of Jesus or what God's up to in Jesus had that same kind of priority, in the time of his ministry and such that we'll be looking at.
Okay. I have no problem with imagining, I'm going to say imagining because I don't have the evidence, somebody looking at Jesus and saying, this is a great prophet. This is the Messiah. And honestly, I have no problem with somebody looking at a coin because every silver denarius said, God is divine, saying, this is my idea of somebody who's divine. I mean, that's the language of the first century. I have no evidence of it, but I don't think this all happens later. I think it would have all died out with this. So I can imagine that very much. And I think you have to ask the question of character, not personality. Because you are talking about Caesar's character. You really would have to say, okay, he could have been a tyrant. He could have taken over and become, I don't know if he'd have lasted very long, but he could have. So yeah, you do have a question of character involved. And I don't think we can get rid of that. There was huge cosmic forces, I think, going on. Because I said, I think the temple was now obsolete and individuals could become holy. But still the character was important. So I think we have to ask all of that. And I don't want to make it seem, because some of my fellow scholars say, well, this is just the language of the first century. Everyone was gods and gods were. And I don't think that really is fair or accurate. Or this is just court protocol. You said, oh, you're divine. I don't think that's right. So you have to go into history and as deep as you can and read the poets, for example, and look at the statues. Say, what would effect that have? And here's the one question I see it. If somebody said to a first century person, are there any people, males, let's say, who have been taken up to God and we don't know about it? I think they would have looked at you and said, huh? Because memory. I mean, when they said immortal life, I can't distinguish it from them immortal memory. So the idea of somebody who's up there and nobody knows about it, we can imagine it. If you said in the Roman Catholic tradition, are there saints we don't know? Yes. Nobody in the ancient world have said that. That's just, where's the memory? Where's the statues? So I think we have to recognize this is the wallpaper of their existence and then see how Jesus fits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just say, since we've already recorded the lectures, the pottery image that I think's in lecture 2 of just even the difference between Caesar Augustus and other Caesars, you get the kind of elevation of his own identity and put in a rather profound way. So you'll get ready for that. Well, how would you one of the elements that runs through the way Jack frames things is an assumption that the self-understanding or self-consciousness of the historical Jesus is transparent in the 4 different evangelist accounts. And obviously that's a bit problematic historically, but how would you kind of frame reading like how should we take the evangelist claims and understand those that take place in the different gospels, and as a historian trying to understand the historical matrix for the person of Jesus' own self-understanding?
Okay, if somebody knows nothing and to pick up the New Testament, it is perfectly reasonable, in fact, even logical. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Oh, we have 4 witnesses, you could say, trying to tell us as best they can about Jesus. And of course, there's differences, even on the same event. And you could be perfectly happy. I have 4 people looking at it. Now, this is where I don't know how to get away from scholarship. I really don't. And this is the first basic, huge debate I had with N.T. Wright, with Tom Wright years ago. Tom basically said, look, all this source criticism stuff, I'm not interested in. And I said, well, then I don't know how to get started, because if you're a lawyer, you're going into court, and you got 4 witnesses to an accident, you're in great shape, you got 4 people. And then suppose in the morning you go in, you find out that one of the guys saw it and the other 3 all heard about it in the bar. I've only 1 witness. So the scholarship that says that Mark is the source for Matthew and Luke, and therefore you can watch Matthew and Luke changing Mark, I don't know how to get around that. I have to say, if you think these are inspired, that God whispered to Matthew, copy Mark and change him. And then that was so successful, God whispered to Luke, do the same as Matthew. Well, he doesn't know about Matthew. Copy Mark and change him even more. And John, are we clear that John is an independent witness? So as a scholar, that means telling the truth as I know it. Not my truth, but my interpretation of the truth with the consensus of scholarship. I don't have 4 witnesses. I have a tradition which develops and changes each one. So I can't take something straight out of Matthew and say, Jesus said that. I have to work with it. I will take Jesus said, love your enemies, because that's from Q, first of all. It's another independent source. But I don't know how to get around that. So I would tell anyone, if they're serious, and if they're not serious, stay away from the Bible. Work with a parallel text, a simple text where you have Matthew, Mark, and parallel columns, and read like that. I spent the 60s doing it but I was in a monastery, so I didn't have as interesting a life in the 60s as lots of other people were having. But that's what I was spending my time doing, reading parallel.
Yeah. Okay. So running through the comments, there were a number of contemporary examples, Dom, where it seems as if our globe has decided to make transparent the nature of civilization, probably just so everyone could explore Jesus in Galilee with us.
Yes,
And so I thought I'd just name
I'm
the
very
examples. I thought I'd name the examples people gave, and then you can kind of use it to frame to give a little closing invitation to where we'll end up going in the class. We had a couple people mention Stephen Miller's rather transparent statement that the role, like the way history works, is the powerful dominate and do what they want, whether it's domestically or in Greenland.
Yeah,
You
we'll,
had
we'll see that one. If I could just say, Josephus saying verbatim that it even works for animals. That's right. If that's the way we're working, then we are a doomed species. We have only so long.
Mm-hmm. We had the Prime Minister of Canada saying the quiet part out loud about the post-war consensus, where he says, "Look, we all knew that big countries were breaking international law, but we all went along with it because the world was just a little bit better if you had the right people in charge, and now we can't even trust you with it." Um, and
Lull is lovely. Lull is lovely, but it's not peace.
we have both the performance of propaganda and the enactment of nonviolent resistance, right? So calling victims domestic terrorists,
Mm-hmm.
and then the witness of nonviolent resistance in Minneapolis, and I think people in the chat were quite accurate anticipating the birth of that kind of movement that we'll end up talking about in the class.
Yeah, look, one example. Supposing this is a purely hypothetical example. Supposing a president were to say, going back to the trilemma, were to say, I have lost, I did not lose this election, it was stolen from me. It would be fair enough then to say that president is either a lunatic, a liar, or a lord. He should be president. So if you want to use that trilogy, it can still be used in individual cases, purely hypothetical cases, because we are watching the normalcy of civilization. I kind of was saying that, for a while, and I was getting to bore myself. I was thinking, what are you talking about? The normalcy of civilization. Everything seems to be peaceful. But the normalcy of civilization is based on escalatory violence. That seems to be the truth. In other words, we've never had a weapon we didn't use or one that wasn't more violent than the one before. That seems to be the way of the world. Now, in my own life, I grew up in Ireland in the 40s when it was neutral. I came to America in 51, which was the year to come to America. So you could easily see what I call lull and mistake it for peace. You really could. Maybe it's inevitable if you're born in the middle of one.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dom, and thank you to everybody who's been hanging out live or watching later. You're all invited to come join. You'll be able to get access to the lectures, use them for yourself or with groups, and then join Q&As throughout Lent this year. And yeah, we're looking forward to it. And